I got a serious question. Are we in a civil war, or are we on the verge of a civil war? What do you guys think the history books are going to say about this moment when we look back at what was happening right now? Let me know in the comments, guys, as we go through everything, man. This episode is crazy. I usually like to just riff and have fun in these videos, but for people that are familiar with my website and the articles on there, I get into some pretty serious stuff. I love studying the nature of the multipolar, non-binary Cold War that we find ourselves in and the nature of fifth generational warfare techniques. So I've got 8 articles in the description. If you guys are at all wondered or confused about what we're seeing in our halls of government, these recent changes, or even where Trump's win fits in the overarching system of the non-binary Cold War that we're living under, or who the actors are, right? All those answers are in the description. Today, what we're going to do is take the analytical framework offered in those articles and then apply it to a lot of the events that we've seen unfold over the past week. So if you guys enjoy the kind of wild speculation that pisses off the establishment, please hit that like and subscribe button and share this video with anyone you can, man, because I don't see anyone making the connections that we're gonna make right here. So Sunday night around midnight, Jamie White, a reporter for Infowars, was offed.
So last night at approximately 11:57 p.m., officers responded to a shoot stab hotshot, which is a high priority call for service in the 2300 block of Douglas Street. Officers arrived on scene approximately 2 minutes later at around 11:59 p.m. and located a male subject with obvious signs of trauma. Austin police officers attempted life-saving measures, and the victim was pretty expediently transported by EMS to a local hospital. Unfortunately, the victim, an adult male, was pronounced deceased at the hospital at approximately 12:19 a.m. this morning.
Now, what first got my gears turning was the timing is awfully convenient, as Trump is beginning to force Ukraine to the negotiation table, despite their recent antics.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation.
Rubio said he would now take the offer to Moscow.
And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball's now in their court.
And Ukraine also agreed to conduct the minerals deal with the US as soon as possible. In the middle of all of this, at the same time, Secret Service pops an armed man in a confrontation near the White House.
The US Secret Service says one of its agents shot an armed man near the White House late on Saturday night. This is the live scene in Washington, D.C. No one else was hurt, and President Trump was not in the building at the time. He is spending the weekend at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Earlier on Sunday, it says local police shared information about
really depressed
the individual who may be traveling to Washington from Indiana. Around midnight, members of the Secret Service encountered the individual's parked vehicle near 17th and F Streets Northwest, that's close to the White House. They also saw an individual on foot matching the description nearby. As officers approached, the individual brandished a firearm and an armed confrontation ensued, during which shots were fired by our personnel. The suspect was transported to an area hospital and his condition's unknown. There were no reported injuries to Secret Service personnel.
Why am I talking about Ukraine? Because in reality, I think that we are in a Cold War that, through fifth generational warfare techniques, is designed to look like a civil war, right? And I believe the axis of evil, as you could say, or who we are in a war with, is largely our own intelligence agencies and foreign entities that they are associated with. And when I stepped back looking at the offing of Jamie White, this Infowars reporter, the other day, it reminded me a lot of the elements of the discontinuation of Seth Rich. You guys remember Seth Rich, who was offed in a botched robbery in DC in the middle of 2016? It's real interesting, man. It was a botched robbery that happened at 4:20 in the morning in a really wealthy neighborhood of Washington, DC. Rich left this motor plane about an hour and a half after being popped twice in the back. The perpetrators were never apprehended. Police suspected that he had been the victim of an attempted robbery, but they didn't take anything. A very similar pattern to what we're seeing here, and also what was Seth Rich doing at that time? family's private investigator. There's evidence Seth Rich had contact with WikiLeaks prior to his discontinuation. And what's really interesting is right after the private investigator came out saying this, he immediately backtracked and stopped responding to all calls. Fox 5 DC asked him, "You have sources at the FBI saying there is information," he says, "for sure, that could link Seth Rich to WikiLeaks." He says, "Absolutely, yeah, that's confirmed." Then 48 hours later, he backtracks and stops responding to everybody. Is it possible the same network, the same intelligence apparatus, the same system with the same agenda is behind both the Seth Rich incident and this incident with the Infowars reporter? Now, this is where my gears start turning in my head, okay? I see Jamie White over here. I'm on the Ukrainian enemies list due to my work at Infowars with real Alex Jones on the Ukraine proxy war between, NATO and Russia. The group who compiled this list is tied to the U.S. State Department, USAID, CIA, and George Soros. I mean, maybe it's just me, but the Seth Rich incident and the Jamie White Infowars incident almost seem like they come straight out of the same playbook. We seem to hear about those organizations pairing up with each other quite a lot. I mean, quite often. And for some reason, their actions always seem aligned with the DNC's agenda. And just so you have the receipts, all right, the Ukraine enemies list is created by an open source intelligence firm named Molfar, okay? And according to the Daily Caller, Molfar is funded by USAID money, a London-based Ukrainian intelligence group linked to the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, labeled American politicians as foreign propagandists, falsely accusing them of Russian loyalty. The group Molfar created an online blacklist including President J.D. Vance, Kentucky Rep. Thomas Massey, U.S. Counterterrorism Director Joe Kent, and others. To be clear, the Daily Caller got confused. Molfar has a corporate entity in the UK to make certain operations easier with their corporate entity listing because they take jobs from all over the world. They are actually based in Dnipro, Ukraine, though, which in the context of some of the stuff that we're about to get into makes me wonder if they're a CIA front group or something. And just in case you guys are wondering, the Economic Times reported George Soros funded chaos in the US, India, Bangladesh via USAID grants worth $270 million, reports claim. The US has granted over $270 million to Hungarian American billionaire George Soros organizations in the last 15 years. East-West Management Institute, an organization partnered with the Soros Open Society Foundations, got the money via USAID program. The revelation comes amid growing scrutiny of US aid and President Trump's recent freeze on USAID's budget. Doge head Elon Musk helped Trump administration highlight USAID's funding for these controversial and regime change projects. As per reports, Soros used this money to spread chaos in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Ukraine, Syria, Iran, Pakistan, India, UK, and the US. Soros also funded controversial initiatives in countries like Albania, Armenia, Cambodia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and Uganda. The same George Soros that's quoted in the Los Angeles Times as saying, "I fancied myself some kind of god. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble." When asked by Britain's independent newspaper to elaborate on that passage, George Soros said, "It's sort of a disease when you consider yourself some kind of god, the creator of everything. But I feel comfortable about it now, since I began to live it out."
Do you believe in God?
No.
It was actually probably the happiest year of my life, that year of German occupation. For me, it was a very positive experience. It's a strange thing, because you see incredible suffering around you, and in fact, you're in considerable danger yourself. But you're 14 years old and you don't believe that it can actually touch you. You have a belief in yourself, your belief in your father. It's a very happy-making, exhilarating experience.
I want to make it clear to YouTube, at no point have I personally expressed an opinion on George Soros here, all right? I am just listing off publicly available information and giving you guys quotes that he has said himself. I have not said anything about him. So according to these public reports, these two entities have been working hand in hand, funding grassroots organizations worldwide. And in case you guys are wondering about the CIA connection, the CIA and Ukrainian intelligence have become so deeply intertwined that they are essentially the same organization at this point, with the CIA turning the Ukraine battlefront into a forward operating base.
Tonight on Prime, the remarkable story of how the CIA and Ukrainian intelligence forged a deep secret partnership that began a decade ago and has been crucial in helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia's invasion. It has also given the U.S. extraordinary insight into Russia. ABC's Patrick Reevell spoke with former U.S. and Ukrainian officials who told him how the CIA and Ukraine became allies in a shadow war.
Lieutenant General Valery Kondratyuk is a former senior Ukrainian intelligence officer. He's at the center of this story. How over the last decade, the CIA helped remake Ukraine's intelligence services.
І от хочу сказати, що певний момент, певний час ГУР став. Головне управління розвідки Міністерства оборони стало головним партнером Центрального розвідувального управління Сполучених Штатів. Головним. Більше, ніж Великобританія.
Kondratyuk led HUR from 2015 to 2016. His account was confirmed by former U.S. officials.
It was groundbreaking how we rebuilt that service.
To support this effort, 12 hidden forward operating bases were built near the Russian border. Surprisingly, or maybe not, the Russians were largely in the dark about how robust the intelligence partnership between the two countries had become. The CIA continued to train new agents and spread them throughout Ukraine.
Workers parked their cars a kilometer away and moved through unmarked paths to the worksite, with labor taking place only when Russian spy satellites weren't overhead. Once they dug up 10 meters under the remains of the former Ukrainian fortification, destroyed by a Russian missile strike early in the war, they could work more freely. The spoils from all their digging had to be cleverly disguised and removed, all without alerting the ever-present overhead Russian spy satellites. Above ground, the former Ukrainian base on the border with Russia is a ruin, but an expansive control center hums with life below ground. State-of-the-art computers and spying equipment fill the underground space, and wires run through the ceiling above and connect with camouflaged antennas hidden amongst the wreckage or the forest above. Ukrainian intelligence analysts pore over the reams of data being collected by the various pieces of equipment, feeding it directly to the Ukrainian intelligence apparatus. This is but one of over a dozen secret spy bases. The equipment is all American, and the funding to operate them is almost entirely provided by this central intelligence agency. While the West dithers and debates over every single bullet sent to Ukraine, America's clandestine intelligence agency has been on the front lines of the war against Russia, with American personnel at work directly within Ukraine and beyond.
Now, in my opinion, what's happening is there has been a civil war in our institutions of government for years. And one side of that civil war, what we call the woke Democrat leftist side, has actually been operating with foreign powers using intelligence agencies as their apparatus, and has essentially become a conglomerate of financial elites that use our intelligence agencies to try to manufacture consent and control the direction our policies take domestically. So in the context of all of this, with the Infowars reporter getting off looking just like straight out of the Seth Rich playbook, with the moves Ukraine is making, with the ties that they have to our own intelligence agencies domestically, when I see at the exact same time a stock market dump where Apple and Nvidia lose 5%, but Elon Musk's Tesla drops a major 15%, when at the exact same time, radical leftists are attacking Tesla dealerships with Molotov cocktails and spraying them with gunfire, at the exact same time that X and Rumble and conservative outlets specifically are getting DDoSed like this. And then Dark Storm, right, a pro-Palestinian organization, claims responsibility, but Elon Musk traces a cyber attack to the Ukraine region?
There was a cyber attack on X today, which shut it down and may have been foreign sourced. Yes. It's a big story. You want to give us a moment on that?
Well, we're not sure exactly what happened, but there was a massive cyber attack to try to bring down the X system with IP addresses originating in the Ukraine area.
I see this pattern playing out, and in my mind, all the circumstantial evidence points to a false flag. I don't think Dark Storm were the people behind this hack. Not to mention, everything is within days of Sonny Hostin coming out and saying this on The View.
The Democrats are not meeting the moment. It is very clear that Medicaid is on the table. It is very clear that Social Security is on the table. It is very clear that people will die. The baby boomers, the civil rights generation, they knew what they had to do. They were willing to fight and die for their rights. This generation of Congress, they are not meeting the moment. This is an existential crisis.
When I look at all this and I step back, what I see is a coordinated assault by the corporate Borg using all of the tools and apparatus that they have available to pressure the outcome they desire. But let me know, man, what do you guys think is going on? From where I'm sitting, with Ukraine as integrated to our own CIA as they are, it is completely feasible that our intelligence agencies are engaging in operations and using Ukrainians or Ukrainian associated assets as proxies, because even if it is exposed with that degree of separation, it actually just promotes the exact narrative that they want. The US becoming an enemy to Ukraine, warming up to Russia. Oh, the US is sliding into authoritarianism. I personally think our intelligence agencies are desperate for a civil war. Anything they can do to weaken America's influence, the US's influence on the geopolitical stage. And I think it all goes back to this. Cloud and Pivot. I think this has been the CIA's mission since 1966, and I think that makes the CIA as much of a threat to our country as Al-Qaeda, as Al-Nusra, as ISIS. I don't think the CIA needs reform. I think its surveillance capabilities and its intelligence capabilities need to be absorbed into agencies with a hell of a lot more oversight, and the CIA itself needs to be completely dissolved and abolished. And every CIA member needs to be investigated for treason. That's my opinion.